Hey there, it's Deb, and welcome to Module 1 of Becoming a Millionaires. This is where you are going to begin to create a really solid foundation for yourself of information and creating a roadmap for your success before you begin. What we're going to be covering today in today's module is your vision. You're going to get crystal clear about what does your vision look like? Like, what does your cake box look like? What does your seed packet look like? What does the cover of your puzzle look like? Now, what do all three of those have in common is that when you look at them, when you buy a cake box, you're not wondering what the results are going to be, right? You know that if you get all the ingredients, and you also now know that if you follow every single step on the back of that cake box, that you will end up with the results. And the steps, what they talk about is, what goes into the brownie mix, how many stirs you need to do. It used to be 50 stirs on the back of the brownie mix, and that is what gave you the results of the front of the brownie mix, and it gave you really happy results. And that's what this process is all about. This process is about you getting crystal clear about what does the front of your cake mix or brownie mix look like? What does the seed packet look like? When you are wanting to plant a garden and you go to the store and you look at the front of the seed packet, it shows you, and you flip it over just like the cake mix box, and it says to you, these are the steps that you need to take to have the results in the front of the packet. So you're going to be creating your cake box cover or your seed packet cover. And in the next several modules, what we're going to be covering is all the ingredients, and here they are here. We're going to be going over your vision, purpose, your identity, your derailers, which is what gets you off track and what you need to do to get back on track, the resources that you have, the resources that you need, and the resources that you might have to get rid of. And then you're going to get really crystal clear, and you're going to reverse engineer your financial objectives so that you have a clearly defined plan with milestones to reach that objective for yourself. And also 40 days of velocity. You're going to have 40 small, quick steps that you're going to take the first 40 days to get that momentum going, to get you in action around becoming a millionaires. So what will your cake box look like? I just want you to look at this for a second. Like, are you interested in, buying a bunch of single family houses? Like, how many single family houses in your area or the area that you want to invest in that will equal $1 million? Is it, do you need to own 8? Do you need to own 2, depending upon the area that you're in? Are you looking to buy a small apartment complex? Like, there's several of them here, like the one in the middle, the one to the right of the video, and the one right under those. Those were single properties that were worth anywhere from $1 million to $500,000. So you don't need to own a ton of properties to meet your financial objective. And that's what I'm so excited about sharing with you, because, as ladies, we have so much on our plate already. It's just how we are. And when we think about owning rental property, there's like this resistance, because the illusion that we have in our head is that, oh my God, I'm going to own, I'm going to be out of control with 40 tenants to take care of. No, you might have 5 tenants, 1 tenant, 10 tenants, and that's all you need. That's all you need to become a millionaires in the making. And for others of you, you're going to want to maybe do some boutique housing, and you might want to do Airbnb or co-work spaces or co-live spaces. But for now, we're just going to go over the basics, and then as we move through the next 9 weeks, we'll talk a little more about what it takes to spiff up the ingredients if that's something that matches you. So we start with a lot of questions. We start with a lot of questions. I'm going to go over them really quickly on this slide. And then over the next about hour together here, or 45 minutes, you're going to take time and write down your own answers. So we're in this part of the program where if you haven't, pause it and print out the PDF, get your workbook, or take out a spiral notebook so you can start taking notes. Because this module this week is about you writing down your specific answers, because yours are going to be different than the person next to you. So what is your objective? What is the one that you want to live into over the next 15 years for yourself? Like I always say 15 years because it's really easy for us to measure it in 15 to 20 year increments, because that's how long it takes to pay off a mortgage typically. So, like what's it going to look like for you over the next 12 months, 3 to 5 years? What is your financial objective? So for most of you, because you signed up for this course, your objective is to build a well-run, easy-to-own, manage and maintain rentals that are worth $1 million. Now, for some of you, it could be $5 million, and for other of you, it could be $250,000. So whatever it is, let's get clear about that in this module together. How many rental properties do you think you need to own to meet that financial objective? It's going to be different for every one of you again. So, if you're a gal in Florida and your average rental is $250,000 as far as a single family house or a college rental or a vacation rental, you may only need to own 4 properties. Now, if you're in the upstate New York area, you could buy some properties as little as $30,000 that need some sweat equity, and we go over that as well. Or you buy a turnkey property in this area for $75,000 to $90,000. So how many of those do you need to own? I mean, you need to own anywhere from 8 to 12 single family homes to meet your financial objectives. So just start thinking right now, right? If something's coming to mind, write it down. What areas do you want to invest in? So some of you that are in like really high, expensive areas, you may not be investing in those areas because you can't get them to cash flow. So, if you're not investing in your area, where is it that you want to start owning rental properties? And if it is in your area, I want you to start thinking about the neighborhoods. What's going to be your farm market that you're going to invest in? What's going to be the city? Like I'm investing right now in a city that's 40 minutes away from where I live. I used to invest in an area that was right in my backyard, and I strongly recommend that for beginners. You also start looking at whether you're going to be managing or outsourcing your management. And because you're going to be owning a very small, well-selected real estate portfolio for yourself that are easy to own, manage, and maintain, I'm going to keep saying that it is quite simple to manage them on your own, but some of you might decide to outsource that. So I want you to, again, to start thinking about that. What type of tenant do you want to house? Like a lot of beginners never think about that. They just buy a property and they just put up an ad, and they don't think about what is the best fit for this property. And literally what I do is I pick my tenant first. I say, okay, so the first 87 rental units that I purchased when I was in my 30s, I just decided to work with single women with children that were on Section 8, because that was the audience that I wanted to become an expert at, and I did, and it turned out so incredibly well for me. I knew what those ladies needed. I knew the types of properties I needed to buy to create beautiful homes for them so they were happy. And then in the second leg of my journey as a real estate investor, which was the last 15 years that I've been reinventing my portfolio, I decided to switch things up. So I decided to cater to mid to high income tenants, professionals. So it's a very different client base. They want to live in really specific neighborhoods. They want to live in a very specific type of property. So, we're going to go over all the different types that you can think about in just a minute here, but I want you to start thinking about it because that's what makes this easy. When you know the tenant that you want to serve, you know the area to invest in, you know the type of property that matches them well, everything becomes really simple and easy. And again, what type of property matches a tenant base? Is it a duplex? Like I was the queen of duplexes when I picked Section 8 tenants because I always felt like I had a dual engine running. If one tenant had moved out, I always had that second unit that would cover my mortgage. I wouldn't be making crazy cash flow that month if I had a vacancy, but I always had another income coming in. And then as I got comfortable, as I got into like my 5th and 6th year as an investress, another sweet spot that I found were these very small 6 to 10 unit apartment complexes that the beginners were afraid to buy and the seasoned investors didn't want. So that's another whole property in Tenant Base to consider serving. So again, what is your overall financial objective? Now, I want you to take a breath here for a moment because there's something about numbers. Like I want you to know this is the number one issue that beginners make is they lack the clarity around a number and they have all these excuses and reasons for not picking one. And I want you to commit to a number right now, and I want you to write it down. Even if you're not sure exactly how you're going to chop it up so that you meet that objective, I want you to get really clear. And if your reason for joining this course was to become a millionaire, I want you to commit to owning $1 million worth of real estate. That's what I want you to do. So pick it now and write it down. We're going to move into this exercise. And you're going to come back to this. You're going to think about it over the next day or so. You're going to come back to this, but you're going to complete this exercise. And it's in your book. It's also on your PDF. So how many rentals? How many rentals do you think you need to own? And again, take a breath. How many rentals do you think you need to own to meet that financial objective, right? So let's move to the next slide. So blank rentals times blank equals $1 million. Now, what do those blanks mean? So depending upon where you're investing, depending upon how much the property cost, depending upon the tenant base you want to serve, you might need, like this is an example for me. In my area, I'm in a, I would say, I'll talk to you about fringe markets, but I'm like right outside, there's like a hot area, and then as you move away from the hot area, which is more of a high income area, you move into fringe markets. Now I'm like kind of on the border there, so I can buy houses, or I buy houses in that area, I do some sweat equity, and they're worth $100,000. So for me to meet my financial objective, I would need to commit to buying 10 single family houses. And you're not going to be buying them in the first 30 days or the first 90 days, or even most likely in the first year as an investress. You're going to put together a plan to buy them just like you would plan a family over time. Now, it's going to be different, right? So on here, let's take a look at some of the possibilities. Like here's 3 properties that I've owned. And I want you to think about, again, the area that you're going to invest in or the city or the state you're thinking of, and you're going to be doing some research on that for yourself because that's important for you to know. So in some areas, again, so if you're in, like my son lives in Arizona, he's in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and some of the single family rentals there go for $500,000 and they still cash flow because they get really high rents. So if you are an investress and you're in a market or an area where the rental properties, the single family houses or the doubles that you buy are somewhere around $500,000, you would only have to buy 2. Now, I want to share this with you because this was really interesting for me. It was kind of like an aha for me. My son moved out to Arizona several years ago, and he was renting almost $1 million home for himself. Believe it or not, his mother's this rock star real estate investor, and my son's renting. What I thought was fascinating was this investor only had to own one property. My son paid almost $6,500 a month to rent this one property. He made a 3-year commitment, and this person only had a 15-year mortgage. So it was interesting. My son stayed there for 4 years. He paid on time every day or every month before the first. That investor only had to own one property to meet his financial objective. And it wasn't the only property that he owned. He owned 5 single-family houses like that. So I want you to think about in the area that you want to invest in, and I know your mind might be going to, how am I going to find the down payment for $1 million real estate property? And we go into that as we move through this process and this program together, this course together. So again, think about, do you need to own 10 single-family houses in the area that you're investing in? Or maybe, like me when I started and I owned over 20 duplexes or doubles, they call them different things in different areas, maybe 10 doubles or 5 doubles or 1 multi-unit. But start thinking about how many properties you need to own to meet your financial objective. Now here's an example of owning a single piece of property, just this one 20-unit apartment complex. I own this property. This is one of my favorite properties of all time. It is so easy to own, ladies, that I forget that I own it, truly. I rarely have a maintenance call. The tenants are a dream to have. They pay on time. They take care of the property. They're great neighbors to each other. Just this one multi-unit property investment would get you to your $1 million objective. So let's break it down. Let's break it down a little bit more. So if your objective is $1 million or whatever it is, look at your number. Where do you want to invest? Now I want you to take some time here because you may not have thought about this before. You joined the course, you want to build a $1 million real estate portfolio, and I want you to start thinking about where it is that you want to invest. What city, what state, what town, what area, and it's going to be specific to where you want to invest. And you might have to do a little research on that for yourself. That's the first thing. You get clear about where you want to invest. Now write that down in your workbook. And I want you to also start thinking about what type of property you want to own. Do you want to own single-family houses? I love owning single-family houses, and I can tell you why. What I love about it is that the way that my leases are structured, once the tenant signs the lease, the only thing I'm responsible for is any maintenance issues that come up, my mortgage, my taxes, and my insurance. Everything else in a single-family house, my tenants take care of. So they take care of the heat, the gas, the electric, the air conditioning. They mow the lawn, they plow the snow. They take care of everything, and they pay the rent. So I love single-family houses. Now in multi-units, it's different. Because in a multi-unit, the tenants aren't going to be mowing the lawn. They're not going to be plowing the parking lot. They're not typically going to be paying the water bill. So, in a multi-unit, you will be taking on more responsibility as a real estate investor. Don't let that scare you away. It's just a fact. So I have really enjoyed owning single-family houses. And I think they're a great way for an investress to build a very small, easy to own, easy to maintain, easy to manage real estate portfolio. So think about those for yourself. what type of property. So this is familiar. This is your cake box cover. Again, so take a look, take a breath here. I'm going to take a moment with you. On the left-hand side, there's an interesting story to that whole grouping of housings. I walked into the bank to make a deposit, and the vice president of the bank stuck his head out from behind his desk and yelled over to me, "Hey, Deb, come here for a minute." And I walked over, and he said, "How would you like to do a good deed today?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And he says, "There's this 80-plus-year-old woman that owns a group of houses over in this area, and her husband passed away, and she's stuck with them, and she hasn't been able to collect her rent there for over a year. And I guess there's a lot of deferred maintenance, and she doesn't doesn't owe any money on it. Would you be willing to step in and help her out?" And I, for a moment I thought, oh my God, I'm so busy. I've got my hands full. I don't property manage for anyone else. But I thought, what, I said I would do a good deed for the day. So, what I did was these opportunities come to me all of the time, just like that. And they will for you too, once you get out there and get the word out. So what I did was I stepped in. I went to every single house. I introduced myself to the tenants. I sat with them. I wrote down all their complaints about deferred maintenance. I got clear with them about the money that they owed this woman who lived in Florida, and these properties were in upstate New York. Of course, they fought me on it because I said they didn't feel like they owed anything because they had been living in such poor conditions. So I was able to turn this around for Mrs. Bowman in the matter of 3 months and get it cash flowing again for her. But eventually what happened was she wanted me to stay in as a property manager, and I said, "That's not what I do." I said, "But I'd be happy to buy these from you." So her son got involved, and I ended up buying every single house in this picture for $40,000 or less a piece. I went in, I upgraded them, and literally I almost was able to double the rents there. So, there's a picture of the houses that I owned, and I completely changed the culture and the feeling of that neighborhood just by eliminating a lot of the tenants, by upgrading them, and then seeking out mid-income earner tenants that would live there. Easy to own, easy to manage, and very easy to maintain. So let's see, the middle property with the columns, that property changed me, that one property. So I used to own 87 rental units 127, but 87 plus tenants that I rented to were gals that were in Section 8. So the middle property, I bought that property in an owner financing deal. I purchased it for $450,000. I owned it for over 20 years. I actually lived in the first floor unit. It was a 5-unit multi-unit, and I sold that one property for a little under $1 million. That one piece of property made me literally a small fortune. But what it changed for me is that, I had been used to working with Section 8, single gals with children, Tenant Base for years, for 16 years. And when I bought this piece of property, it was a stretch for me. It wasn't like I was buying properties between like $60,000 and $70,000. To buy something for $400 and something thousand was a very different way of being an investress. But it changed me so much, and I enjoyed serving that tenant base that was very different, the one that I was very experienced in, that when I decided to move into another area and start my whole investor's journey all over again, I decided to work specifically with mid to upper income earning folks that I could provide beautiful housing for. I always provided beautiful housing, but in this case, I was able to afford, granite countertops and new kitchens because the rent base was so much higher. So that's the middle one. The one to the right, same type of story. Actually, all the rest of them, these were all in the second leg of my journey. But what I can tell you, about every single property that you see here is that I picked the property to match the tenant base that I wanted to serve, and they were easy to own, easy to manage, easy to maintain. And what I can tell you about when I started, I didn't have a lot of money. So what I offered was clean, well-maintained properties that were freshly painted, the lawn was mowed, the common areas were clean and picked up. I didn't have the money to do the major upgrades until I was past my 15th year as an investress. So for you, you might be in the same spot. So don't think you have to do these major upgrades. Paint goes a really long way. A fresh mailbox, clean, like cleaning the windows, cleaning the floors, just making sure everything is in really good shape before you house that tenant. Where do you want to invest? So the second question from there is, will you be self-managing or will you be hiring a property manager? So I'm going to really encourage you to self-manage because you'll keep the money, that extra 10% that you would give out on management, because you'll be learning some of the properties that are easiest to own, manage, and maintain. It doesn't take that much time to actually, and I'll be showing you the systems, the systems that you need to have in place for yourself so that you can easily manage and maintain your property. But, if you have a full-time busy career or job, or you own your own business and this is not the best time for you to be actually doing your own management, then you need to seek out and find a property manager to take on your rental properties. So ask yourself a question. I want you to think about it for a moment for yourself. Will you be self-managing or will you be outsourcing the management? Again, ask yourself this question. Write it down. Think about it. Where do you want to invest? What state? What city? What neighborhood? What type of property do you want to own? What tenant base will you rent to? So there's a real range of tenant base, and let's talk about the range. I want you to start thinking about it. Like you think about the property, you think about the area you want to invest in. Do you want to rent to college students? Like, what are the pros and cons to having college students as tenants? Do you want to rent to grad students? What are the pros and cons to renting to grad students? And if you decide to rent to college students or grad students, do you want to offer furnished rentals? Do you want to furnish the house so they don't have to bring their belongings in and out each year? And what are the advantages to furnishing the house for college or grad students? You want to rent to mid-income earning tenants that have pets. So that's an interesting question, right? Like, why am I saying that? Because say you buy a multi-unit like the one that I have here, the 20 unit that I talked about earlier. I want you to think about if you start renting this 20 unit to tenants that have pets, what's that going to do to you as far as management and maintenance? Now, what I found with mid-income earner folks is that they really take care of their pets and they're very conscientious about picking up after their pets. So I want you to think about that. And the other thing that you want to really realize is that if you have a property and you start accepting pets, what's nice about that is that there's a tolerance that all the neighbors will have around maybe your dog barking occasionally, or around picking up droppings on the grounds, or whatever happens when you own a pet. It's different if you don't have a pet. It's very similar if you decide to rent to just families with children. If you have a building, and say if you buy a property has 3 units on each side, and one side is a 1-bedroom and the other side's a 3-bedroom, you put a family on one side and you decide to put a mid-income earning or a professional on the other side, what do you think is going to happen there, right? So when I go out and I start looking for tenants, I want to have a culture match so that there's happiness, so there's joy in both their living spaces. So I want you to think about that. So what tenant base are you thinking about for yourself? Now that we've gone through several slides here and you're starting to write ideas down, and there's just such a huge range. So what is it for you? What tenant base do you want to serve? Do you want to work with mid-income earners, professionals, mid-income earners with families? Maybe you want to go after specific like Hispanics, Ukrainians. If there's a certain sector of that, Section 8, DSS, and those are welfare recipients. Maybe you want to go after senior housing or co-live environments or co-workspaces. So what is it for you? And you're going to have questions about this. I want you to bring the questions to the coaching session so you get the support and the guidance that you need. But write down what's coming to mind right now. Now, remember, I told you this is a long video. This is so important for you, and you probably are already seeing it for yourself, is that you are going to have such clarity before you buy your first rental property that when you go out there and you start shopping and looking for your first rental, you go, okay, does this match the tenant base that I'm thinking of working with? So in this property, I housed mid-income earners with pets, with dogs. And the reason I did this was that this particular property was what I call on the edge of a fringe market. And in that area, it still was in transition. And what I found was that I attracted a lot of young women that wanted to live in this property. They had their first job out of college, and they just really felt safe having a dog. And I got thinking about it because I invested a lot of money in upgrading this building, and you can see the outcome of the upgrade on the right-hand side of this video. That's what the apartment looked like inside. And after I thought about it, I thought, you know what? I am going to allow dogs in this building. And I'm so glad I did, because I attracted these amazing tenants. They loved it there. They all got along. I owned this property for three years. I bought it for $140,000. I did major upgrades on this property, and then I sold it for $385,000. And that's something that you'll learn about. And in the last part of this course is sometimes when you buy a rental unit and you upgrade it, if that's what you want to do, is build sweat equity, and you own it long enough where you get a lot of your renovation costs back, then you might think if the market peaks up, if it jumps up there, it could be time to sell it and then take that money and then buy your next several properties with. Pros and cons. So what is the pros and cons of owning a single family house? So the con, I would say, is that they say that, if you buy multi-units, you have one roof, one boiler, one hallway to vacuum, one water bill. So in single family houses, if you have to buy, let's say, 4 or 5 or 10 single family houses, now you've got 10 roofs, 10 furnaces, 10 hot water tanks. So I guess that's a con. I love owning single family houses. I really think they're some of the best investments for us to own, ladies. I really do. So I want to tell you what the pros are, because there's so many pros about owning single family houses. So the pros are that if you buy the properties like I'm going to be teaching you in like up and coming fringe areas that have a decent school system, they don't have to have the best, but a good school system, my findings are that the tenants move in and they almost stay for the entire length of the mortgage, because they claim it as their home. The kids start living there like they own the house. They treat the house like it is their home that they own, and they just never move out. I mean, my average tenant stays 6 years in my single family, or actually in all my properties, but especially in single family houses. So I want you to really, really think hard about owning single family houses. The other great tenant base for a single family house is if you do an upscale co-live house. This is becoming really trendy right now, where you buy a single family house and you completely furnish it with high-end furnishings, and then you rent it out by the room with some common areas. And this is not a boarding house. This is like a 3 to 4 bedroom house where you charge $800 to $1,000 per room, and then they share the rest of the house. This is a great application for a single family house. These are super properties for grad students, for college students. So I am a huge advocate of you considering owning single family houses as a beginning investress. So now that you have answers to these questions, or you're starting to get answers, you're starting to get clarity around, wow, I hadn't thought about all these possible answers to these questions. And you start getting clear about your vision. Like, you're creating the cover of your cake box. You're creating the cover of your packet of seeds. Like, is it starting to get clear for you? Like, what does it look like for you? Like, what single family houses, duplexes, 3 families, 42 unit apartment complex, 20 unit apartment complex, a double, a 3 family, working with grad students, working with senior citizen, working with Section 8 tenants, working with single mom with children, working with Hispanic culture base, working with the disabled. I haven't talked about that. Working with mid-income earners with families. What types of property? Where are you going to invest? What tenant base? Like, all these questions is what builds a solid foundation that you need to have before you even start owning or looking for rental property. Your financial objective, go back to that. I know that this is the one that skipped the most because there's some resistance about committing to a number. Please go back to that. If you haven't written it down, please go back to that and complete it. So I'm going to put my glasses on for this so I can read this to you, because these are some of the visions that past clients have written out. And you're writing your story. You're writing the ingredients that are going to go on the back of your cake box. My financial objective in owning rental properties is $1.5 million that I buy over the next 5 years. I self-manage my properties. I own 10 single-family houses in a small suburb where I live. I rent to mid-income dual-working households with children, and I allow 1 pet. I was able to buy several of these investments using creative financing. My rentals almost doubled in value within 10 years as I bought them in an up-and-coming area. I had low turnover and low maintenance tenants that were a delight to have as residents. They paid the rent on time and took great care of their property. So again, you're going to be writing out your story. What does your story sound like? And what is it for you? We just went through all the little pieces, all the ingredients that you need to create the vision, the outcome that you want for yourself, that you're going to live into over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 1 year, 3 to 5 years, and 15 years out. Like, what does it look like? Because when you create this and when you get clear about this, it draws you quickly into it. The next one. My financial objective in owning rental properties is $2 million that I buy over the next 3 years. I work with a property manager that takes care of my 7 single-family house vacation furnished rentals in Florida. I rent to mid-income earners that want a nicely furnished place that is well kept and within walking distance to the beach. I borrow the down payment from my self-directed SEP IRA, and I use bank financing. My rentals steadily increased in value and ended up being worth $3 million at the end of the 15-year term. I received a high 10% return on the money I borrowed from my SEP IRA, and I built a nice extra retirement nest egg for myself. I had a high occupancy and a very reliable property manager who took great care of my property. Again, what will your story be? What is your story? I've heard part of your story already in your intake process. Some of you are interested in having this extraordinary experience working during your retirement time with the love of your life. It's like the kids are gone and you're just going to be buying one property at a time, savoring the experience, investing in the area that you live in. Others of you are coming, you have a large family. You have 3 or 4 children, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're retired from a very successful career, and you and your husband have decided that you want to own rental property, and you are taking that on powerfully, and he's joining you in the process, and you've decided to include your whole family and your children. You're going to make it a fun experience. And your vision of this is that you see your children living into inheritance, becoming part of this multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio that you're going to build as a family. So here's the last one. My financial objective in owning rental properties is $1 million that I buy over the next 3 years. I bought a small 30-unit apartment complex that needed work. I'm handy and I love to keep busy. I partnered with my attorney as he knew and trusted each other. We got traditional financing from the bank. I managed the property for our partnership, and my partner came up with a down payment. Our tenant base was low-income earners, some Section 8 residents. We didn't allow dogs and ran a tight ship. The sweat equity paid off. We upgraded the property, increased the rents, which increased the value of this property to $1.8 million. We received a high 20% return because of buying it so cheap and increasing the rents. I was able to take care of this on my off time and enjoyed owning this property. So again, take a deep breath, and I want you to think about, what will your story be? Oh my goodness, that makes me emotional when I just think about it. What will you live into over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 to 5 years, 15 to 20 years out? Like, what does it look like? And I want you to know there's something about this process that when you write it down and you get clear and you commit to it and you're in action around it, things are going to happen that you can't even imagine right now, but you've got to make the commitment. You've got to write it down. There's something that happens. It gets crystallized when you write it down, you commit to it. And I'm not saying that it's not going to change over time. It could. You might change the tenant base that you work with. You may change or add an area that you want to invest in. You might decide to partner with someone because it's just something that you'd like to do and it might make it easier for you. You may borrow money differently. So it could change a little bit over time, and then you'll go and upgrade your story. And that's what happened to these stories. Like at first, the stories weren't as clean and crisp and clear as this, but inside of a year, this was the story that my clients have created. So what's your story now? If you write nothing else on your piece of paper, I want you to commit to the absolute financial outcome that you want. Start there. If you're having I'm not sure about the rest of it, start there. So in our next module, you are going to be getting crystal clear about your purpose. And we're going to be talking about how your purpose is the glue that keeps your vision together. But for now, I want you to, if you haven't, print out the PDFs, start filling in your answers, go back over this video, pause it when you need to, or get out your workbook or get out your spiral notebook, start making notes as far as questions that you have, bring them to the coaching call. Do not rush through this module. Take your time. This is a very, very important module The work you'll be doing this first week is like if you were building a house, it's like creating the foundation of the house. You know, it's like you've got to find the location, you've got to dig it out, you've got to, you know, lay the cinder blocks and pour the concrete. I mean, it is so important to not create something that you're going to have a cracked foundation on. You want to have a solid foundation before you begin. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video, and great work. Keep going, and bye for now.